He'd worked a lifetime with calloused hands and quiet dreams. When Michael Reed, a man of 59, bought the town's forgotten train station, people laughed. They said he was chasing ghosts. That night, the storm rolled in. Rain hammered the roof as Rex, his loyal German shepherd, began growling at the ticket booth floor. Michael knelt, pried up a loose board, and froze. A trail of red paint, ending at a locked iron door no one had touched in 50 years. Whatever waited behind it was about to change everything. Before we start Journey, please take a few seconds to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from? Chapter 1. The Cold Contract. Rain whispered across the abandoned rail yard, a slow, steady drizzle that turned the earth to glass and the air to steel. The last train had passed through this place 20 years ago, and silence had taken up residence ever since. Now, as the clouds pressed low over the valley, Michael Reed stood before the old station, with the deed in his hand, a single sheet of paper that smelled faintly of damp ink and final chances. Michael was 60, with a frame that had grown wiry from decades of factory work and backbreaking shifts in repair shops that smelled of oil and rust. His hair, gray at the temples and thinning on top, clung damp to his forehead, and the faint stubble across his jawline could never quite disguise the tired nobility in his face. He had the hands of a man who fixed things no one else wanted to fix, knuckles scarred, nails blackened, palms lined like old maps. Behind his pale blue eyes lingered a sadness he had learned not to show, a loss too old to name, perhaps the death of a brother during his youth, perhaps simply the slow erosion of dreams. Beside him stood Rex, a 6-year-old German shepherd, with a coat of dark sable and amber eyes alert as firelight. The dog's ears twitched at every distant echo, every rustle of wet grass. Once a rescue from a county shelter, Rex had the poised strength of a trained guardian, but in his gaze there was also gentleness, the kind that comes from having known hunger and confinement and choosing loyalty anyway. Michael exhaled, long and deliberate, looking up at the crumbling facade of the old Riverside station. The sign hung crooked, half swallowed by ivy, its paint long stripped by wind and neglect. The windows were boarded, the doors chained once, now broken. He traced the edges of the paper in his hand. "Mine," he murmured. The words sounded both ridiculous and sacred. It had cost him less than his rusted pickup, but it had cost him everything else. Every dollar saved over 10 years. Every extra shift he'd taken after his back had already started to go. The townspeople called him foolish, chasing ghosts instead of resting his bones. But Michael was not a man built for rest. Somewhere inside, he still carried the boy who once stood by the tracks, waving at locomotives that thundered past, believing the world stretched wide and welcoming. He tucked the deed into his jacket and walked toward the entrance. The wind carried the faint clang of loose metal, a ghostly rhythm that echoed through the station yard. Rex padded beside him, nose low, tail wagging once before stiffening, his instinct alerting him to something unseen. "Easy, boy," Michael whispered. His voice was low, warm, carrying that tired authority dogs understand. The inside of the building smelled of dust and rain and rot. The waiting benches were split open, the wood dark with age. Spiderwebs laced across the corners of cracked windows, and a faint draft stirred the old timetables that still clung to the wall. Michael's flashlight cut through the gloom, landing on faded posters of smiling travelers, faces frozen in a decade that had forgotten him. He felt an ache in his chest, a mixture of grief and wonder. Here, in this decay, he saw possibility, not wealth or prestige, but a quiet belonging, a place that asked nothing but care. Later that afternoon, after the courthouse paperwork was finalized, Michael drove to Millie's Diner, the only cafe in town that still brewed coffee, strong enough to wake the dead. The bell above the door jangled as he entered, shaking off rain from his jacket. Behind the counter stood Evelyn Brooks, a woman of 58 with silver-streaked auburn hair tied loosely in a bun. Her posture carried the quiet elegance of someone who had once danced and still remembered the rhythm. Her hazel eyes, warm yet cautious, lifted from the register and softened when they met Michael's. Evelyn had taught music for most of her life until her husband died 5 winters ago. Since then, she'd found solace feeding stray cats and playing piano for the church on Sundays. "Michael Reed," she said, a smile playing at her lips. "Word is, you've gone and bought yourself a ghost." He chuckled, sliding into a stool. "A station, technically. though I suppose the ghosts come free. She poured him coffee without asking, the way small-town people do when they know too much already. You really think it's worth fixing? Michael looked into the black swirl of the cup. I don't know. Maybe fixing it will fix me a little too. Evelyn tilted her head, studying him. There was a tenderness in her eyes that caught him off of guard, a quiet recognition of loneliness meeting loneliness. Just promise me you won't go poking around in there alone. That building's been standing longer than either of us. Some things fall without warning. Rex, lying at Michael's boots, gave a low whine as if agreeing. Evelyn leaned down to scratch the dog's ear. And you, she murmured, make sure he doesn't do anything stupid. Rex's tail thumped once, a solemn vow. That night, the storm returned in earnest. Michael parked his truck outside the station, headlights sweeping over the wet tracks glinting like veins of mercury. He wanted to see the place again in darkness, to feel its heartbeat. The rain soaked his hair, his shoulders, but he didn't mind. He was home in the quiet way a man finds home after losing everything else. Inside, he lit a lantern. The beam spilled across the ticket booth, the cracked T's, and the long stretch of wooden floor. The building groaned under its own age, timbers shifting like the breath of an old man in sleep. Rex moved ahead, nose twitching, ears perked. The dog stopped suddenly near the booth, pawing at the ground. What is it, boy? Michael crouched, shining the light downward. One of the floorboards was loose, just slightly, but enough to notice. He pressed against it. It shifted, hollow beneath. A strange unease crawled up his spine. He pried the edge of the plank, and a faint gust rose from below. Cold, carrying the smell of iron and something older. The lantern's flame flickered. Somewhere deeper inside the station, a shutter slammed against the wind, and for an instant Michael thought he heard it. A sound like the whistle of a distant train. Impossible, he muttered, though his voice trembled. No trains had run through Riverside in decades. Rex growled softly, stepping back, hackles raised. The light quivered across the wall, revealing something he hadn't seen before. A faint red mark, just above the ticket window. He moved closer. It was paint, faded but deliberate. A red arrow, pointing toward the storage room at the end of the hall. He stood frozen, rain dripping from his hair, the lantern trembling in his grip. He didn't remember that mark being there before. The whistle came again, low, mournful, and too close this time. Rex barked sharply, spinning toward the door. Michael turned, heart hammering, but there was only the storm, pressing its fists against the walls. The lantern sputtered once and went out, plunging everything into darkness. And in that moment, through the howl of wind and the creak of timbers, Michael swore he heard footsteps on the platform. Measured, deliberate, impossibly human. He called softly, "Hello?" But only Rex's steady growl answered. Outside, lightning split the sky, and for a single heartbeat, the red arrow on the wall gleamed bright as fresh blood. Chapter 2. The Filing Cabinet and the Letters Never Sent. Morning came gray and cautious, the sky a dull metal lid pressing against the world. The rain had stopped, but its scent lingered, earthy, cold, and clean. Michael Reed awoke in his small rented house with the memory of the red arrow still burning behind his eyes. He had not imagined it. He couldn't have. The sound of those footsteps haunted his dreams, though Rex had slept soundly at the foot of his bed, chest rising and falling in perfect calm. Michael knew he had to go back. By noon, the station lay quiet under the pallid light of winter. Weeds shivered in the breeze like sentinels. Michael pushed open the doors, their hinges groaning like an old man waking. Rex trotted ahead, nose close to the floorboards, his fur shimmering gold and charcoal beneath the weak sunlight that slipped through the cracks in the roof. The place still smelled of damp wood and metal fatigue, but now there was something else too, a faint sweetness, almost floral, as though time itself were exhaling. He walked toward the direction of the red arrow. The paint, even faded, seemed deliberate. At the far end of the corridor stood a small office with shattered glass windows and a rusted filing cabinet nearly swallowed by cobwebs. Dust coated it thickly, a soft shroud of years. Michael tugged at the handle. It resisted like a secret unwilling to be told, then gave way with a cry of metal on metal. Inside were bundles of yellowed papers bound with brittle string, some stamped with military crests. At the bottom drawer, his fingers brushed an envelope sealed with wax so old it flaked at his touch. He pulled it free, brushing off debris. The address was written in a slanted, careful hand. "To my dearest Anna, should I not return?" His breath caught. Rex whined softly beside him, sensing the tremor in his master's stillness. Michael opened a few letters, the paper fragile as ash. They spoke of young men who had passed through Riverside Station on their way to war. Hopes, promises, small jokes written between fear. Some letters had never been sent. Their envelopes bore no stamps. He imagined them tucked away hastily when the final whistle blew, forgotten as boots marched into history. Beneath the letters lay a folded sheet of thick parchment, almost like blueprints. He spread it on the desk, careful not to tear it. Lines and measurements stretched across the page. A floor plan of the station, but with something new. Beneath the main hall, a sketched cellar or tunnel, marked storage level, restricted access. The spot aligned almost exactly with where Rex had found the loose board the night before. Michael's heart thudded in his ears. The whisper of the past was growing louder. That evening, he brought the letters to Evelyn Brooks, the music teacher from Millie's Diner. Her house sat on the edge of town, a small white cottage wrapped in ivy, wind chimes tinkling in the porch light. When she opened the door, her face brightened with surprise, then softened into curiosity. "Michael Reed," she said, brushing a strand of silver hair from her cheek. "You look like a man who's found something worth telling." He hesitated. "I think I found history, Evelyn, in the station." She invited him inside, the faint scent of cinnamon and old books surrounding her. The living room was warm, filled with the low hum of a record player spinning a soft tune, something by Ella Fitzgerald, faint but steady. On a table by the window sat a small upright piano, its wood polished to a golden sheen. Evelyn took one of the letters delicately, eyes scanning the faded ink. Her brow furrowed, then lifted. These are real. The paper, the style, it's from the 1940s. She looked up, meeting his gaze. These men passed through our town. Some of them never came back. Her voice trembled slightly as she read aloud one line. "The trains sound like angels tonight. I hope you can hear them from home." Silence filled the room, except for the turn of the record. Evelyn's eyes glistened. She reached out and placed her hand gently over Michael's scarred one. "You found something important, maybe even sacred." For a moment, he forgot the gray years behind him, the noise of machines, the smell of grease. There was warmth here, and music, and the strange comfort of being understood. Rex lay at their feet, resting his head on Evelyn's slipper, as if he, too, had been waiting for this peace. They spent hours cataloging the letters, laying them on the table like relics. Evelyn knew how to handle old documents, using parchment paper and soft cloth gloves. She told him about her late husband, a history teacher who had once dreamed of opening a museum of local heritage. Her voice cracked slightly when she spoke his name, but she smiled through it. He would have loved this discovery. The next morning, word began to spread. Small towns are never good at keeping secrets. When Michael returned to the station, he wasn't alone. A man leaned against his truck, smoking. He was broad-shouldered, thick-necked, his beard trimmed too neatly for honesty. Carl Dawson. Carl was 45, owner of a scrapyard on the south end of town. He had the kind of smile that never reached his eyes, gray eyes, cold and calculating. Years of scavenging had made him suspicious of everyone, convinced that luck belonged to those who grabbed first and asked later. He used to work in construction until an accident, a collapsed scaffold, left a deep scar across his chin and an even deeper bitterness toward the world. "Morning, Mike," Carl drawled, flicking ash into the gravel. "Heard you've been digging up treasures in that old dump." Michael tightened his jaw. "Just history, Carl. Nothing worth your time." "Everything's worth something to someone," Carl replied, stepping closer. "Tell you what, why don't you let me take a look? Maybe I can make you an offer. Scrap prices are up." Michael shook his head. "Not for sale." Carl's smirk faltered into a scowl. "You always did have a hero complex. Don't say I didn't warn you when people start coming around asking questions." He crushed the cigarette under his boot and walked off, the crunch of gravel echoing behind him. Rex barked once, sharp and low, until Carl's truck disappeared down the road. That night, Michael worked late under the dim glow of his lantern. The rain had returned, softer this time, tapping the roof like fingertips. Rex prowled the hall, uneasy, his ears flicking toward the old freight room. Every few minutes he growled quietly, a sound deep and restrained. "What is it, boy?" Michael asked, but the dog only stared at the far door, where the shadows pooled thickest. He followed Rex's gaze. The freight room smelled stronger of rust and earth. The lantern beam caught something metallic in the floor, a latch nearly hidden beneath boards. He knelt, pried the planks apart, and found a trapdoor locked with an iron padlock, ornate and old, its surface engraved with swirling patterns now dulled by time. Michael brushed off the grime, the words faint but still legible along its rim. Property of the station master. He sat back on his heels, staring at it. The station master's journal had been among the papers in the cabinet. He remembered now, a single entry scrawled across the last page. The true treasure is not gold. He touched the lock again, feeling the cool weight of mystery in his palm. Rex whined, pressing close to his side. "What do you think, boy?" Michael whispered. What did he mean? A gust of wind rattled the doors. Somewhere outside, lightning flashed. The lantern flickered once, then steadied. Beneath it, the iron lock gleamed faintly, like an eye just opened. And for the briefest moment, Michael thought he heard a sound from beneath the floor, a single, hollow knock. Chapter 3. The darkness below and the iron wheels. The night was cold enough to sting. The moon, veiled behind clouds, painted the world in shades of silver and steel. Michael Reed stood once more before Riverside Station, the lantern light flickering in his hand, his breath coiling in the air like smoke. For 3 nights, sleep had refused him. The sound of that hollow knock beneath the floorboards had repeated in his dreams, rhythmic as a heartbeat. Tonight, he could no longer resist. Beside him, Rex shifted restlessly, tail low but ears alert. The dog seemed to feel the tension humming through his master, the same mixture of fear and resolve that had carried them through many nights on the road. The German shepherd's coat gleamed faintly in the lantern light, muscles coiled beneath his fur like drawn wire. Michael had come prepared, a length of sturdy rope, a heavy crowbar, a new flashlight, and the old padlock he'd finally decided to break. His palms were raw by the time the lock gave way with a metallic snap, the sound echoing through the station like a warning. He hesitated. For a brief moment, he thought of Evelyn Brooks, her gentle voice when she'd said, "Some things fall without warning." He could almost hear her now, soft and worried, urging him to be careful. He wished he'd told her he was coming back tonight. "Stay close, boy," he whispered. Rex nudged his hand in a reply, then stepped forward as the trapdoor creaked open. The air that rose from below was cold, stale, and wet, like the breath of something long buried. A narrow staircase descended into blackness. The beam of Michael's flashlight caught slick stone walls, glistening faintly with moisture. He gripped the rope and began to climb down, boots scraping against the steps. The air grew heavier, thick with the smell of rust and mold. Every drop of water that fell from the ceiling seemed to echo like a drumbeat. At the bottom, the passage opened into a chamber. The flashlight revealed wooden shelves bowed under age, their contents blanketed in dust. Michael's heart pounded. Here, beneath the forgotten bones of the station, was a world untouched by time. He moved slowly, his light sweeping across relics scattered on the floor, crates, helmets, and a dented brass trumpet that caught the light and reflected it weakly, like a dying star. Nearby, a pile of army helmets sat in silence, each one still marked with faded initials. Train tickets, unsent and unused, were strewn like autumn leaves across the dirt. Michael knelt beside a half-rotten wooden box and pried it open. Inside were small pay ledgers, the ink still visible in places. Wages, dates, signatures of men who had once passed through this place. Beneath them lay something more curious, an old Morse transmitter, its metal frame surprisingly intact. On impulse, Michael fetched the small portable battery he carried for his flashlight and touched the wires together. The machine came alive with a faint electric hum. A single pulse of light blinked from its bulb, as if testing its own resurrection. Michael smiled. "Still alive after all this time," he murmured. Then Rex barked, low, urgent. The sound reverberated off the stone. Michael turned sharply. The dog stood near a far wall, pawing at the bricks. Something about the way the mortar curved drew Michael's attention. It didn't match the rest of the wall. It was too smooth, too deliberate. He approached, pressing his hand against the surface. It gave slightly beneath his touch. "Good boy," he whispered. The wall was hollow. With effort, he wedged the crowbar into a crack and pried loose a brick. Then another. Behind them, dust fell like ash, revealing a dark cavity. Inside gleamed the edge of iron, a rusted chest, heavy and locked. Michael's heart quickened. He pulled it free, coughing as the dust rose around him. The chest bore a brass plate, nearly unreadable. He rubbed at it until the letters emerged. Property of the Riverside Benevolent Fund. He froze. The words struck like lightning. The Benevolent Fund. He remembered whispers from old men at the diner, stories of money collected during the war to support the families of local soldiers who never came home. The fund had vanished when the station closed. Everyone thought it had been stolen or lost, but it had been here, buried beneath their feet. "Rex," he said softly, voice trembling, "we found it." Before he could decide what to do next, a sound broke through the silence, the squeal of hinges above, followed by the heavy thud of boots. Michael's blood ran cold. The beam of another flashlight sliced through the darkness. "Well, well," a voice drawled. "Looks like you did the digging for us." It was Carl Dawson, his silhouette filling the stairwell. He carried a crowbar of his own, and behind him came two men Michael didn't recognize, both rough-faced, dressed in work jackets smeared with oil. One was tall and lean, his face pinched and narrow, eyes darting nervously. The other was short and broad, with a flattened nose that had clearly been broken more than once. "Evening, Reed," Carl said, stepping down the stairs. The beam of his light caught at his scarred chin, the jagged mark pale against the stubble. "I told you treasures don't stay secret long." Michael straightened, chest tightening. "This isn't treasure, Carl. It belongs to the town." Carl laughed, the sound cruel and echoing. "Town never cared about me, or you for that matter, but they'll pay good money for what's in that box." Rex growled, teeth bared. One of Carl's men reached for his belt. Michael saw the glint of a knife. "Don't," he warned, voice low. "He'll tear you apart before you take a step." Carl raised a hand, smirking. "No need for that. We'll keep things civilized." He turned and gestured toward the breaker box near the stairs. "But I think we'll level the playing field." With a flick, he threw the switch. The lights died instantly. The flashlight beams vanished, swallowed by blackness. Michael's breath came fast. The darkness was complete, thick as oil, alive with sound. He heard one of the men curse, then the scuffle of boots on wet stone. Rex's growl became a snarl. "Rex!" Michael hissed. "Here!" The dog barked once, guiding him through the dark. Michael's skin brushed against cold metal, pipes, slick with moisture. He followed the faint hiss of leaking air, remembering the blueprints. An old maintenance ladder led to a hatch at the far side of the chamber. "Come on, boy," he whispered. The two moved carefully, Michael gripping Rex's collar with one hand, dragging the heavy iron chest with the other. Behind them, Carl shouted, voice echoing through the chamber. "You're not walking out with that, Reed." Michael ignored him, searching for the ladder. His fingers found it, cold, rusted but intact. He tied the rope around the chest, hoisting it slowly upward with effort that sent pain ripping through his shoulders. Rex climbed first, agile despite the dark. Below, he heard footsteps approaching. Carl was close. "You think you're the hero?" Carl growled. "You're just another fool chasing ghosts." Michael grabbed the Morse transmitter with his free hand, slammed the battery into place, and hit the key 3 times. The signal pulsed through the chamber, a desperate SOS. Above, an old loudspeaker crackled to life, static hissing, then broadcasting the code in sharp beeps across the silent town. The sound cut through the night, eerie and insistent. Rex barked wildly as the first faint light appeared from above, the hatch swinging open. Voices answered from outside, startled shouts carried on the wind. Evelyn's voice rose among them, trembling but strong. "Michael!" He heaved himself up the ladder, drenched in sweat, clutching the chest. As he and Rex emerged into the freezing air, the faint red dawn broke over the fields. Behind him, the sound of footsteps faded, Carl's curse swallowed by the dark below. Michael lay on the ground, gasping, the cold sky spinning overhead. Rex nudged his cheek, whining softly. The Morse beep still echoed faintly from the speaker. He reached out and rested his hand on the iron chest. "We did it, boy," he whispered. "We brought it back to the light." But when he looked toward the open hatch, there was only silence, and the faint echo of something rolling below, a sound like iron wheels turning in the dark. Chapter 4. The Trial on the Platform. Dawn spread across Riverside like the slow lifting of a curtain. Mist rose from the fields, curling around the broken fences and the tracks that no train had touched in 40 years. The old station, once a place of whispers and echoes, now hummed with life again. Voices drifted through the cold morning air, townspeople gathering, police cars parked in the muddy lot, and the metallic clink of handcuffs echoing against stone. Carl Dawson stood between two officers, wrists bound, jaw clenched in fury. His once proud face was streaked with grime, the scar on his chin livid beneath the rising sun. He spat onto the ground as Sheriff Tom Heller read him his rights. Heller was a large man in his late 50s, his gut stretching the buttons of his khaki uniform, but his eyes were sharp, gray, unblinking, and seasoned by decades of keeping peace in a town that rarely gave it. His voice was low, steady, like a man who'd long grown weary of lies. "Carl Dawson, you're under arrest for trespassing, attempted theft, and destruction of historical property," Heller said. Carl sneered. "Historical property? It's a pile of rot and dust." Michael Reed, standing beside Evelyn Brooks, tightened his grip on Rex's leash. The dog stood tall, tail wagging slowly, his gaze fixed on Carl with unblinking intensity. Rex had been restless since dawn, pacing between Michael and the police as though guarding both. His fur was still dusty from the previous night's struggle, but his spirit burned bright, unyielding. Evelyn, wrapped in a long wool coat, placed a hand on Michael's arm. "You should tell them," she whispered, her voice carrying both worry and pride. "Tell them what's down there." Michael looked toward the open trap door at the platform's edge. Beneath it, the darkness yawned like a secret now exposed to daylight. Reporters from the local paper, 3 of them, were already taking notes. Among them, a young woman named Claire Weston stood out, a slender journalist with cropped brown hair, freckles across her nose, and a camera slung over her shoulder. She had the air of someone too curious for her own safety, her green eyes sharp and restless. "Mr. Reed," she called, stepping closer, "is it true you found the missing benevolent fund from the war era? People are saying you risked your life for it." Michael hesitated, feeling the weight of every watching face. "It wasn't just me," he said quietly. "It was here all along, waiting to be found. The real credit belongs to the people who built this place, and maybe a good dog with better instincts than mine." At that, a ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. Rex barked once, as if claiming his share of the applause. Later that morning, the town held what the sheriff half-jokingly called the trial on the platform. The station's waiting area had become an impromptu courtroom. Folding chairs were set up in neat rows, a long wooden table served as the bench, and coffee brewed in thermoses for the crowd. The smell of damp wood mixed with the sweetness of cinnamon buns someone had brought along. It was small-town justice in its purest form, honest, clumsy, and human. Carl sat between his 2 accomplices, now sheepish and silent. The tall one, whose name turned out to be Eddie Marks, had hollow cheeks and a nervous tick in his left eye. The shorter man, Roy Dunn, broad and bruised, kept rubbing his wrist where Rex had bitten him. Both looked more afraid than defiant. Evelyn took the makeshift stand first. Her composure was gentle but firm, her voice carrying the same warmth she used when teaching music. She spoke of how Carl had approached her weeks earlier, offering to buy any scrap or curios from the old station. "He didn't care what it was," she said softly. "He just wanted what didn't belong to him." Carl interrupted, snarling, "That's a lie. You can't prove a damn thing." Sheriff Heller fixed him with a look that could cut stone. "Quiet, Dawson." When it was Michael's turn, he walked slowly to the front. His body ached from the night before, but his voice was steady. "This place isn't about treasure," he said. "It's about memory. People left letters here, wages, promises they never got to keep. We all forgot them. Maybe this is our second chance not to." He gestured to the open chest resting beside the table. Inside were the ledgers, the envelopes, the old army helmets and paybooks. The crowd leaned in, whispering. From the second row, an elderly woman rose shakily to her feet. Her name was Mrs. Helen Carter, a widow in her 80s with snow-white hair pinned neatly under a wool hat. She held one of the letters in trembling hands. This is my brother's handwriting," she said, voice breaking. "He left from here in 1943. We never heard from him again." Silence fell. Then another man spoke, an old veteran with a cane. "My father's name is in that ledger. I thought the money was stolen. It was no longer a trial. It was a resurrection." Tears glimmered in Evelyn's eyes. She reached for Michael's hand under the table, squeezing gently. He squeezed back, unsure whether he was trembling from emotion or exhaustion. When the sheriff finally dismissed the charges, the crowd burst into soft applause. Carl was led away in handcuffs, shouting half-formed threats that no one listened to. The people remained, gathered in the fading light, as if unwilling to leave. Claire, the journalist, approached Michael once more. "What will you do with the fund now that it's recovered?" Michael looked at the chest, then at the faces around him. Lined with age, scarred by time, but shining with something he hadn't seen in years: faith. "We'll return it to the town," he said. "All of it. I'll use what's left of the station to start a community fund for veterans and families who need it. Maybe we'll call it the Riverside Memory Fund." Someone began clapping, then another. Soon the platform filled with sound, applause, laughter, even a few tears. Children ran forward to pet Rex, who stood proudly beside the chest. The dog closed his eyes as small hands brushed his fur, the tension of the past nights melting into calm. A little boy slipped him a biscuit, which Rex accepted with grave dignity. Michael watched, a soft smile breaking across his worn features. For the first time in years, he felt something unshakable inside him, a quiet peace, the kind that stays. Evelyn turned toward him, her cheeks flushed from the chill. "You didn't just save a station, Michael," she said. "You saved the way people see each other." He met her eyes, and the air between them seemed to hum with unspoken warmth. "Maybe we both did," he replied. As dusk deepened, the last train whistle, an echo from the town's ancient speaker system, sounded faintly through the platform, as though history itself was exhaling. The lights flickered, and for a moment, the station felt alive again. Rex lifted his head, ears pricked, and barked once into the fading light, his voice blending with the sound of the ghostly whistle, a promise that some memories never die. Chapter 5. The Station Bell in the Dawn. Winter had softened its grip on Riverside, trading snow for mist and ice for dew. The sun rose pale and patient over the town's new pride, the restored Riverside Station, no longer a ruin but a living monument. Its red brick walls gleamed under a fresh coat of paint, and the glass windows, once shattered and dark, now caught the light like the eyes of something reborn. The platform clock, long frozen, ticked once more. Michael Reed, in a neatly pressed gray shirt and worn leather boots, stood by the main entrance, watching people arrive. The deep lines on his face had eased. His shoulders no longer carried the weary stoop of a man fighting storms alone. He was still the same man who had worked with his hands all his life, but now those hands built rather than endured. Beside him, Rex sat tall and proud, his sable coat brushed until it shimmered like burnished copper. At 7 years old now, the German Shepherd had grown calmer, carrying himself with the dignified stillness of a veteran soldier. His eyes scanned the crowd with that same sharp loyalty that had once saved Michael's life beneath the earth. The day marked the opening of the Riverside Memory Hall, a museum and community center funded by the rediscovered Benevolent Fund. Inside, glass displays showcased relics found in the underground vault: the brass trumpet, the soldiers' helmets, the bundle of letters. But beyond the artifacts, the station had become something larger, a gathering place for healing, music, and remembrance. A small crowd had already formed, chatting warmly. Evelyn Brooks stood near the entrance of the new music room, her auburn gray hair glinting in the light that filtered through stained glass windows. She wore a dark green dress that brought out the gentle color of her hazel eyes. Her presence radiated a calm grace, though her hands still trembled slightly whenever she played the piano, not from fear, but from reverence. Evelyn had transformed one of the old waiting rooms into what she called the Hall of Voices. Each Saturday, she read aloud one of the recovered letters to an audience of townsfolk, stories of young men who had once departed from Riverside, their words of love and courage echoing through time. Today she would play for the crowd before the unveiling of the new station bell. The mayor, Arthur Benson, a stout man with silver hair and a booming voice, took the stage. Known for his jovial nature and his tendency to pat everyone on the shoulder as if they were old friends, Arthur had been a lawyer before turning to local politics. Years of public service had rounded his once sharp features, but not his enthusiasm. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice echoing across the crowd, "today we gather not just to open a building, but to wring back the heart of Riverside. Thanks to the courage and integrity of one man and his remarkable companion, this station stands again as a home for memory, music, and hope." Applause rose. Michael's face flushed. He shifted awkwardly. Rex barked once, on as if to share the attention. Laughter rippled through the onlookers. When the mayor gestured for Michael to speak, he stepped forward slowly, holding the microphone with both hands. "I didn't do this alone," he said. "This place, it belongs to everyone who remembered and everyone who came to help, to those who gave time, money, and heart. And especially," he glanced toward Evelyn, "to those who believed when belief was hard." He paused. If I've learned anything, it's that not all treasures shine. Some wait quietly in the dark until we're brave enough to listen. As he finished, murmurs of approval spread through the crowd, but instead of continuing, Michael stepped aside. There are people here who deserve to be heard more than me, he said. Families who lost loved ones, who found their words again through this place. From the front row, an elderly man rose. Mr. Daniel Harker, a retired mechanic with sunken cheeks and trembling hands. He unfolded a letter and read it aloud, voice cracking. To my father, I hope I come home a better man. His eyes filled with tears. He didn't, he whispered, but his words came home for him. The silence that followed was sacred. Even the children stopped fidgeting. After the speeches, Evelyn moved to the piano in the Hall of Voices. The crowd followed it as she played What a Wonderful World. Her fingers trembled at first, but when Michael placed a hand gently on her shoulder, the tremor vanished. The melody filled the station like sunlight spilling through an open door. Rex lay down beside the piano, his head resting near the gleaming brass trumpet in its display case, as if guarding the memory of all it had once played for. Outside, the mayor climbed the steps to the restored station bell, hanging from a new wooden frame crafted by the town's volunteers. The bell had been cast anew in bronze, engraved with the words, "For those who left and those who remembered." When the first strike rang out, it echoed across the valley, deep and solemn, rolling over the fields like thunder turned to prayer. The crowd grew still, then applauded, the sound mingling with birdsong and the distant rush of the river. As the celebration waned into afternoon, people lingered to share food, laughter, and old stories. Children ran along the platform, chasing each other between benches. Older couples swayed to music played by a local band. Evelyn stood with Michael near the door, her hand lightly brushing his. You know, she said softly, there's one more thing this station needs. He smiled. What's that? A proper caretaker, she said, turning to face him, and a partner to remind him to rest once in a while. Michael chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. Are you volunteering, Ms. Brooks? Her eyes met his, warm, fearless. No, she said, I'm saying yes. The words hung in the air like a song only they could hear. Later, as the sun descended, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold, Michael led Evelyn to the front steps of the station. The last light spilled through the windows, glinting off the old iron tracks. Rex trotted behind, tail wagging lazily. From his pocket, Michael drew a small ring, plain silver, worn but honest, like him. I don't have much, he said, voice low, but I have this place and a heart that's finally steady. Would you stay? Here, with me? Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, not of surprise, but of recognition. She nodded once. Yes, Michael Reed, she whispered, for as long as the trains remember us. The bell rang again, soft this time, as if blessing them. Rex tilted his head back and let out a quiet, trembling howl that rose and faded with the sound, not mournful, but harmonious, like an old melody rediscovered. And in that moment, beneath the evening sky and the echoing bell, the station became more than history. It became home. And so, my friends, the story of Michael, Evelyn, and Rex reminds us that miracles don't always come with thunder or angels. Sometimes they come quietly, through the hands of ordinary people who choose kindness when no one's watching. The Lord works in mysterious ways, through loyal deeds, through forgotten places, and through hearts willing to rebuild what the world abandoned. Maybe tonight, when you look at the small moments of your own life, the kindness of a stranger, a memory that warms your heart, or even the wag of a dog's tail, you'll see a little bit of God's work too. Because His grace isn't always a lightning strike. Sometimes it's a gentle light that leads us home. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who believes in hope, leave a comment below to tell me what it meant to you, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story of faith, love, and second chances. May the Lord bless you, keep you safe, and remind you that no matter how far you wander, there is always a train waiting to bring you home.